Hello there, I'm Randy Skretvet, and we're watching Why Girls Love Sailors. Now, this film, they began shooting it January 31st, 1927. They worked on it essentially 2 weeks through Tuesday, February 15th, and then they shot some more from the 16th through the 19th. And then almost a month later, Hal Yates did some retakes on March 18th and 19th. You know, the Hal Roach comedies were always previewed, and if audiences indicated that a certain sequence wasn't funny, they'd rewrite it and shoot a whole new scene, and I'm quite sure they did that with the ending of this film. Now, the idea of Laurel and Hardy appearing in a nautically themed adventure had been proposed earlier in August of 1926, when a script called S-14 was written. It would have co-starred Anna May Wong and Sojin Kamiyama, and it had a lot of elements of action and adventure, and it would have really been the first teaming of Laurel and Hardy at the Hal Roach Studio. By the way, you can read that script in my book, The Laurel and Hardy Movie Scripts. You can also read the script for Why Girls Love Sailors in the Laurel and Hardy Movie Scripts Volume 2, and that's enough commercial. The script offers this summary of the story, which is very different from the film. The story concerns a little girl who was picked up in a storm at sea by an old fisherman. Now, speaking of the old fisherman, look at the bottom right. You will see him in just a moment for just a few seconds. There he is, Charlie Althoff. Now, that is a pal of Stan's, and he was a vaudeville buddy. Stan said in 1962, he wrote some letters to Richard Sloane and Chuck McCann, and he said, Althoff was a very nice person. He can hand you a lot of laughs. Charlie appeared in one silent film with me. He was playing at the old Pantages Theater here in vaudeville. He had a week's layoff before opening in Salt Lake City, so I was able to fill in a few days for him at the Roach Studio. Charlie did a great vaudeville act, a very funny rube character. He was known as a showstopper. The film he worked on was a fishing village story and a family of fishermen. His character was named Grandpa Smelt, and I was his wayward grandson Willie. All the family smelt, and so did the film, to high heavens, unquote. Well, actually, the old man in the script is called Sam Salt, and he's the guardian of Viola Richard, who you see there. Stan, or Willie Brisling, is just her boyfriend. He's not related to the old man. And the script in this part of the story has a very, very lengthy and involved scene involving a piano and the fiddler's bow and some kittens and some fish. Well, you can read that in the script, Laurel and Hardy Movie Scripts Volume 2. As I mentioned, Stan's name is Willie Bristling in the film, bristling being a small fish similar to a sardine. And we're seeing Viola Richard, Evelyn Viola Richard, born in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on January 26, 1904. She had done a tiny role in a 1926 film called Exclusive Rights, a crime drama produced by B.P. Schulberg. And this film, Why Girls Love Sailors, was her next credit. It was her first of 13 shorts for Hal Roach, 7 of which featured Laurel and Hardy. She's also unforgettable in a Charlie Chase film called Limousine Love, as a lady without clothing who hides in the vehicle hired by Mr. Chase on his wedding day. And her next film after that Chase short was Laurel and Hardy's short Should Married Men Go Home, and that was her last prominent role. She evidently left films because she got married in August of 1928 to the Fox Theater executive Alexander Kempner. Now, she did dabble a bit in acting. She was in a dramatic short in 1929 called The Lineup. That's her only speaking part in movies, and you can see that on YouTube. The Lineup from 1929. It's a dramatic two-reeler. In October and November 1934, she was in a Broadway production called Geraniums at My Window, which lasted for 27 performances. And she also did some extra work at the Roach lot in 1935. She's in Tit for Tat and Our Gang's Sprucin' Up. It's interesting here that Stan has a tattoo. And you'll see in a moment he kind of does the crying routine also. This stomach gag where Stan has an extended stomach because of all this water. There's the crying routine. Stan has a distended stomach because of all the water. That would be expanded in the 1930 short Blotto. Anyway, Viola divorced Mr. Kempner in 1938, and she married a man named Sidney Rusinow, who managed a cosmetics company that Viola had started, and they were together from 1942 until he passed away in 1951. On Christmas Eve of 1953, Viola married philosophy professor Lawrence McCafferty, who survived her. She died in Riverside, California on December 28, 1973, just about a month shy of 70. And I want to thank my friend and fellow son of the desert, Brad Farrell, for information about Viola. Now, Stan, of course, has to come to the rescue of Viola. And I think they're shooting day for night here. I'm not sure. They did actually shoot. That looks like day for night to me there, because you can still see some. It still looks like the sun is out. They've just probably stopped it down to make it look as much like night as they can. By the way, behind the camera was a man named George Floyd Jackman, born in Tama, Iowa on March 27, 1885. He had been a student at dental college in 1910, but by 1918 he had followed the lead of his older brother Fred to similarly become a cameraman at the Mack Sennett lot. And working at the Warner Brothers studio in the early 20s, he transitioned to the Roach lot in 1924, and he photographed 4 Western features starring Rex, the King of Wild Horses, in addition to several short comedies with Charlie Chase and Mabel Normand and others. And after he filmed Laurel and Hardy's You're Darn Tootin' in January of 1928, at the age of 42, he put away his camera permanently, and by 1929, Floyd Jackman had his own dental practice, and he had an office for years at 6777 Hollywood Boulevard. He was the dentist to the stars, and he passed away at 77 North Hollywood on November 27, 1962. Oh, there is Jerry Mandy. Okay, Jerry Mandy was born as Gerald Mandia, or Gerard Mandia, I should say, in Utica, New York, on June 5th, 1892. He'd been doing supporting roles in 2 reel comedies for Joe Rock and for the Stern Brothers before coming to the Hal Roach Studios in 1924. And for the next 3 years, he worked at the Roach lot almost exclusively. He appeared a lot in the All-Star series, like this one, and also with Charlie Chase. Now, his most prominent role during this period, aside from this one, may well be the soldier in With Love and Hisses who eats garlic to the dismay of his fellow train passengers. And just after he appeared in this film, Jerry Mandy had a featured role in the Joseph von Sternberg drama, the dramatic feature Underworld. So he was quite versatile. He could do dramatic parts as well as the comedy ones. Played by Malcolm Waite, was supposed to be Captain Typhoon, the gentleman who preferred blondes. Well, that will come into play later on. Now, Malcolm Waite, who is the captain there, he had worked as a foil to comedians before. He's with Harry Langdon in Feet of Mud in 1924, and his best remembered role is Jack Cameron, the bad guy in The Gold Rush, Charlie Chaplin's feature of 1925. He was born on May 7th, 1892, in Menominee, Michigan, and he amassed several important roles during the silent era, notably in the Eddie Cantor feature Kid Boots in 1926 and in the 1928 epic Noah's Ark. And from the advent of the talkies from 1942, he did a lot of unbilled bit parts. He died 56 in Van Nuys, California on April 25th, 1949. He was known as the Millionaire Extra because he evidently had some connection somehow to high society. How, I don't know. Now, before long, you're going to see a trunk, a theatrical trunk, which will have a lot to do with the rest of the story here. There it is, Jules Ellinge Theater. Now, that's clearly meant to suggest Julian Eltinge, who was a renowned female impersonator in vaudeville for many years. In fact, he even had a theater named after her. Now, in the script, this women's clothing was not left behind by a theatrical company. It was left behind by one of the captain's girlfriends named 8 Belle Bertha. And the captain, who prefers blondes, remember, he throws 8 Belle Bertha off the ship when he discovers that her blonde hair is only a wig. Well, gentlemen prefer blondes, and evidently Malcolm Waite is someone who follows that philosophy. The captain has evil designs on Viola, which will soon be somewhat abated by that receipt spindle. That's what that's called, a receipt spindle. And now, once again, Stan is in feminine attire, as he was in Duck Soup, and as we will see once again in Sugar Daddies. And as I mentioned, Stan was in a vaudeville sketch from 1918 through 1921 called No Mother to Guide Her, and every day he dressed up in women's clothing and did probably 3 or 4 shows a day doing that sketch. Now, this sailor, that's Edgar Deering, born May 4th, 1893 in Ceres, California.